Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co author of The Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass you could pick up at theoryofdfs.com. Join with me, as usual, Neil Orfield with the XFL hat on, just like the thumbnail, right, from your first appearance here.
That's right.
Are you actually excited for USFL DFS? Me and James McCool talked about it on the DFS pregame show. Our plan is to, instead of playing USFL DFS, is we're going to try to solve Madden Sims DFS.
Interesting.
Because
I so I've
I
never
think that
gotten.
the Madden games may actually be better quality than the USFL.
Sure, they're probably better quality. I think we've talked about this before. I don't really care about the quality of the games. As if there's enough money on the line, I'm going to be interested. We talked about this in NFL, how the product was so bad this year, and I didn't really care because I just had a lot of money on the line, and that makes it interesting for me. So yes, I am excited. Kind of depending on the prize pools. Like if they do it like hockey, like or like some other sports where it's like max of 20,000 is like the most you can win in a USFL contest, I'm going to lose a lot of steam with my excitement. But if they're doing 50K, 100K prize pools, then yeah, count me in.
I think it's going to depend on what happens with baseball.
Yeah, probably. You're probably right.
Truthfully, I'd play MLB DFS over any of them, over anything. Uh,
Yeah,
and I don't think this baseball season is going to start on time, for
no.
sure. And it's not because I want to play baseball so badly. It's because I don't. The later and later it gets into NBA season, the less and less I want to play NBA DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of enjoy late season NBA, but it is definitely uh, a lot more hustle. Like you really need to be on top of things. You need to be glued to your computer later in the year. So I understand not wanting to play it, but I feel like there's more edge. So I'm into it.
Well, wouldn't you say the same thing with USFL? You have to figure that the injury
Oh yeah,
reporting for USFL
yes.
is going to be nowhere near. You're not going to get Schefter tweets at midnight for USFL.
Yeah, you need to like find like you need to be searching the player's name in USFL to find out any info on them. And a lot of times it's fans. Like I remember at least one time in XFL, there was a fan tweeting out, "Oh, this player is out on the practice field," and I just had to trust the fan that it was true that that player was actually out there, and it worked out for me. I think I actually made money off of playing some random player that other people weren't playing because nobody was reporting on whether they were playing the game except for some random fan, and I was searching Twitter and looking at the latest updates, trying to figure out is he actually playing in this game.
I read that the USFL, they'll be playing all their games in one venue. Apparently,
I think I just read that this morning. Yep.
like that it'll be four games on a day, but it'll be back to back to back to back.
Yep.
So to me, that just adds more work because
It
to me
does.
it feels like every week will be like a Thanksgiving NFL slate where
Yeah.
it's only four games. You're not getting these 10 game, 12 game slates. First off, and then when you get these slates, it's late swap city. Let's
Yep.
how did things did you get the you'll be having those tweets, Neil, right? Your estimation, your non-scientific
Oh yeah.
method
You're right. I
of
can do that
if a
again.
player is going to make the optimal lineup.
Yeah. We'll see it. We'll see how many people get into USFL. If anybody cares about that for USFL. For NFL, I got some positive feedback, but I don't know how many people are going to care about USFL contests. If it's, I guess if it's 100K to first, people probably will, but it will be even less scientific for me with USFL because it's a lot less hard to predict what you need from a given player.
Well, I think they'll start out with decent prize pools. I think ETR is doing some content for it. I think then when you played XFL DFS, the contests were pretty good, right?
Yeah, yeah, there were 100K to first contests. There were early on, especially, it was like they would split it up on. So I think DraftKings would do 4 game slate. So it was usually 2 games on Saturday, 2 games on Sunday, and DraftKings would do a 4 game slate, and FanDuel would do two game slates. And I took down one of those for 100K on FanDuel, a 2 game slate. And then I didn't ever actually win one on DraftKings, but yeah, they had varying contest size. I don't remember if they did Showdown. I think if they did, I didn't play it anyway. But yeah, they had for at least the first several weeks. I think both sites had $100,000 prize pools, and then I think by week 5, because it only went 5 weeks, they were down to 50,000 to first.
And is there any difference necessarily when you played XFL DFS to NFL DFS? Is I mean slightly different rules, I guess. I mean, is I mean, other than the players being shittier. I mean, and you have to expect the offensive efficiency to be poorer. Like, was there a dramatic difference in how you played XFL DFS and NFL?
Not really. I would say in general the field overreacted more week to week. So like week 1, oh, this player was the clear stud on this team. He had 10 catches for 100 yards. Then everybody would jam that player in the following week. So it was the field played differently, but yeah, it was uh the same way I would play NFL for those kinds of scenarios if they came up in NFL. But I would say in general there was less content, less information out there in general just about players and teams and what we could expect. So it was more doing my own research in terms of like scouring Twitter and trying to figure out who was playing and what I could learn there versus just listening to content or reading content to figure out who were going to be, the players who were expected to be involved. And then I don't remember if there were ownership projections for XFL or if I just kind of had an idea of how people were going to react to certain players week to week. So yeah, the truth is, I can't remember exactly how good the content was out there. I don't think it was as I don't think there was as much. Definitely was not as much. I don't remember to what extent there was like ownership projections and how good the projections were. I think Osmo might not have actually done projections for the first couple weeks, and then maybe later in the 5 week season they started doing them. But yeah, it's in general the same kind of game theory applies.
Right, but there's no sample size on anything though. I mean,
Yeah,
we're
exactly.
talking about literal brand new teams. What team who has good defense? Who has good run defense? Who knows?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
no one. I mean, really, no one knows anything. And I guess you're right that when there's literally no league or team sample previous to current, when you have a 1 week sample size,
Yeah,
people just overreact and go, oh, 24 carries for 140 yards and 2 touchdowns. Obviously, they're giving in. Obviously, we could project that again, right,
yep,
and not care about especially the receivers with the target shares, right? So I mean, like, oh, okay, one 8 for 80. Okay, I guess he has a
yep.
22% target share, and it's like, well, the next week, who knows? I mean, who knows?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's just a matter of, yeah, the small sample size, and that's all people have to go on. So people just majorly overreact to those. And I think even the projections probably overreact to that kind of thing because what else can you do? You can't just like say, oh, it was random. It's a 1 week sample size. We can't read into it at all. They're going to read into the little information that we have. So, yeah, I think just in general, it paid off to get a little bit different.
So how many games are they playing in this season?
I don't know. I actually have not, to be honest, gotten into USFL yet. I haven't done any research other than I was tracking the draft selections as they were coming in and looking for familiar names from the XFL. But yeah, I have not really done any research into USFL yet. That's something I'll, dive into once the time comes, like I do with every other sport. I mean, you've talked about how you don't know which players have switched teams until the season starts for various sports, and I'm kind of the same way in general. I'm not usually paying attention until it's relevant to me, until the season comes up.
Well, looks here. I'm on the Wikipedia page. So 8 teams, and looks like hosting 8 teams holding 43 games. So how many games is that?
43. I guess that includes the playoffs,
I don't know.
right?
I'm trying to read here, and so 32 to 35 games are planned to be played at Protective Stadium, while 8 to 11 are to be played at Legion Field. So that's Birmingham, Alabama. So if you're down in Birmingham, Alabama, you're gonna love USFL, I guess. Season schedule. Okay, each team will play a 10-game schedule, which
Okay.
each team facing divisional opponents twice and non-divisional opponents once. And it's April 16th to mid-June. The fact that they have team names that they're playing all the games in Birmingham, Alabama, yet there's the Houston Gamblers, the New Orleans Breakers, the Tampa Bay Bandits, the New
Gives you an
Jersey
allegiance,
Generals.
right?
Are you gonna just root for just like, oh, I'm in Philadelphia, so I guess I'm a Philadelphia Stars fan, even though I can't actually see my team play in Philadelphia because they're playing all the games in Birmingham, Alabama.
I mean, probably that's what they're counting on, right? They need to give fans something to cheer for, some reason to cheer for one team versus the other. So
Right? You're cheering for
might as well give them
laundry. Isn't
regions.
that what that's a Seinfeld bit? It's
Cheering for
essentially
laundry.
what you cheer because of the uniforms, right? Because
Okay.
players switch teams or whatever. So really, all you're rooting for is people's laundry,
Okay. Yes.
right?
Yeah. Essentially.
That's
Yeah.
essentially what we're doing.
Since they're not even playing home games, yeah, it's true.
And most of the time, I mean, on any team, most of the time there's no one on the team that's actually from the city that they play.
Yeah, that's true of all sports.
Right. So really, what are we rooting for? I mean, I mean,
Are,
me
are we
and
getting
you,
into
we're playing.
tribalism here? Is that the conversation we're having?
Well, I mean, we play
Tribalism
DFS.
of
I'm
sports.
not rooting for anything other than my lineup, so it doesn't
Yeah.
matter to me. But as
I mean,
far as
I
like,
root for Minnesota teams, but they're clearly take second behind my bankroll. So yeah, I want the Timberwolves to win, but I want
only
myself
because
to win
that's the
money.
franchise that happens to
Yeah, I mean it is
exist
100%.
there.
Yeah.
Other than that, I
Yep.
mean, what does it is there any reason why you should?
No, I don't like the owner, so like I don't have any real reason to cheer for the team. I don't even like Karl Anthony Towns is like the star, and he seems like a decent guy. He's also just really corny, and I don't know. He's not the guy who would be my favorite player in a vacuum if it was like if I didn't have a local team. But yeah, there's no reason for me to cheer for the Timberwolves. I do love Ant Edwards just because he's fun. But other than that, yeah, it's just a locality thing.
You got the Vikings, you got the Twins,
Yep.
right? You got the Minnesota
Yep.
Wild,
I don't even watch hockey, so
right? You
I
got
should. It's right here in
Minnesota
St. Paul.
United, in the MLS.
Yep. Been to a few of their games.
Okay, so there's stuff to root for, I
Yeah.
guess.
No, I guess that's the reason you can go to the games and it's fun to cheer for a team when you go to the game. But yeah, I'm not super into the tribalism aspect of sports either. But
Like
makes it a little fun.
I can understand rooting for a team if it represents your community.
Sure.
Like I almost feel like I understand more about like college basketball or college football
Right.
or even high school sports
Yeah.
where it's
Texas
like
high school football.
right, but at least that to me that's understandable. I mean, it's very similar around the world with soccer. Like not in the top leagues. Cuz you go to England and like most of the most of the players that play for the Premier League teams, I mean, 60% aren't even from England,
Yeah.
right? Let alone from the actual cities that the clubs are in. But you go down to the third, fourth, fifth, you go down to the lower divisions. I mean, these are community teams. These are, I mean, the chairman of the board of the team is the guy that owns the auto dealership in town. I mean, like
Right.
it's and the players that come up they came up through the school system in that town in that city. So it's like
Yep.
most of the people on the team are actually from
Yeah.
that
So it makes
city.
more sense to actually
Right.
cheer for them. I
Right.
agree with you.
Like
Yeah.
I'm from this city.
Totally.
Okay, they represent us. But it's like
Yeah.
rooting for the Yankees. It's like what, like only because they're in New York. I mean, but that's what you do. I mean, you don't know any better when you're younger, right? When I was a teenager,
Yeah.
it was like Rangers, Giants, Yankees, Knicks, and it's like, oh, none of these people are actually from New York. Why am I? Why do I care? Why does it matter? Only
I mean,
because they're
but then
here.
for me, like as a Timberwolves fan, I do like players better if they like Minnesota, which is a weird thing, and like I know it doesn't really make sense, but
Are
like
they going to not? What are
D'Angelo
they going to say?
Russell.
They don't like Minnesota? Of course, they're not
I
going
mean,
to. Even
some
if they hate
players,
Minnesota, they're not going to tell you.
yeah, but some players embrace it more and are more vocal about like I want to be here. This is where I want to spend my career. I feel like Pat Beverly, D'Angelo Russell have come in and really embraced Minnesota, whereas
I think it's
Zach.
all a branding thing. I think
Oh, it
they'd
totally
rather
is.
not live
Nobody wants to be in Minnesota. Why would they want to? Why would they want to live in Minnesota? It's a small market. It's cold. There's no incentive for
All the
them to really
players do
love
the same thing.
Minnesota.
They come to every especially in soccer when they always talk about the supporters or whatever. That whatever team you play for, that they have the best supporters, right? Right. We
Yeah.
play for the fans and the best supporters in all of the league and whatever. And then next year they're on another team and they're talking about how their supporters are the best. They love
Yeah.
playing in front of them. Come on.
Yeah. And in Minnesota, it's like, yeah, we're 30th out of 32 in attendance. Like, come on, nobody's buying that we're the best fans in the league.
But I mean, there are markets that are better than others,
Oh, for sure.
right?
You'd love to play in New York or Los Angeles
Well, I
or
think I know. I think players like playing in New York and LA because they they prefer living in big
oh yeah, yeah.
cities. Or like
Yeah, there are
Miami
more
because of the
knowledgeable
weather. I
fan
mean,
bases.
it's not because of the fans. It's because of like, oh, if they weren't playing basketball or whatever sport they are, they would prefer as someone that is worth millions upon millions of dollars and doesn't have to worry about the affordability of a city. Like who's going to choose Indianapolis over
Right.
New York?
Right, right. But you mean apart from that, there are some actual like more knowledgeable, more serious about it fan bases that players would prefer to play for
I don't think it has anything to
apart
do with
from
the
the city?
players. I think it's more of the fan bases are better
Oh,
or better,
sure.
or they all have their different personalities, right?
Yeah.
Especially in the Northeast, Boston, New York, Philadelphia,
Yep.
right? Like
Distinct personalities for
very
sure.
distinct personalities.
Yeah.
Now, if playing DFS, it doesn't really matter where you play. Like truthfully, in DFS, you would prefer, like I think the best place to play DFS is Canada
What do you mean? Because there's no
because
taxes?
there's no right, right.
Yeah. Sure, sure, yes. For sure it's the best place to play.
So like if you were Neil, now you're playing DFS full time, and the location doesn't matter as long as it's legal to play where you are. Is there a reason to live
Yep.
in Minnesota anymore?
My wife's job.
Well, other
But
other than that.
I'm like my family and stuff. Like obviously
Well,
there are
other than
no
okay,
DFS
let's go
reasons.
through all the
Yeah.
stuff that okay, screw that
Right.
all it. But I mean,
Yeah.
if it came if it came down to it, like truthfully, play like if you're 20 something years old with no
Yeah. If you're
dependents.
trying to maximize your profitability, yeah, move to Canada. And if you don't hate the cold, but yeah, if we're just trying to maximize profitability, yes,
But
move
even
to
if you're
Canada.
not moving to Canada, it still would be like I mean like I obviously I came from New York and now I live in Louisville, but the main reason is because it's so much cheaper to live here than it is in New York. And if you don't
Yeah,
need New York as a location, I don't see any reason why you should live there.
yeah. I mean, unless you enjoy New York as a city, but from a profitability standpoint, I agree with you.
Right. So what you need to do is you need to get rid of what your wife has to find a new job, and you have to get rid of a family, and then move to a better state for both tax purposes and just weather.
Well, yeah, that would be hard to do, but I mean, yeah. So I guess Louisville, you're probably right in the mecca of like places you'd like to live in terms of good weather, low taxes
Yeah, yeah.
for
I
DFS.
mean, I guess Alabama would be cheaper if I went
Okay,
further south. Tennessee,
yeah,
Alabama, Mississippi, but who wants to live in Mississippi? I mean,
right,
I mean
yeah,
that's ridiculous. But from a weather standpoint, I love the way it said. Well, you could live anywhere. You'd rather live where it's warmer, but when the hell do I leave the house anyway? So what is it? We had that tweet. Did you see that tweet on Twitter?
the $100,000 to not leave your house.
Right, like
Yeah, I
for,
could do
for
it
what? For a
easily.
week, I think, or something. Was it a
Yeah,
week
for
or a
1 week.
month? I mean, whatever time
One
frame it
week.
was,
It
it was
was
way
1
too
week.
short. Right.
Yeah.
To
Yep.
to not even step foot outside. I'm like, dude, that
I've probably done that in the
I've
past
done
2
that.
years.
Right.
I'm guessing I've done that. Maybe not. I don't know because I leave to like walk the dog and do random stuff, but it definitely would not be an issue for me.
Right. So should the weather matter?
No, I could do it in the summer too. I mean, I'd rather do it in the winter, but I could do it in the summer too. But there are probably days I don't leave my house during the summer as well.
Another thing about location, since we're on the subject, do you think that there's what would be the ideal place to live from a time zone perspective?
West Coast, I would think, just because you'd be done early enough in the night to
To do
you know
what?
you could do all of your late swaps and then go out and enjoy your life.
Yeah, but or you could do it the opposite and do it beforehand. I would guess it depends on what type of person. if you're a
Yeah,
morning person, you'd prefer the West Coast, and if you're a night person, you prefer the East Coast.
maybe. I'm a night person for sure, so I should prefer the East Coast. But because I'm a night person, I feel like I would rather get all of my late swapping done before I go out and
Go out
enjoy my
where?
evening.
What are you doing? There's
I
nothing.
don't
You're
know.
not going out and doing anything.
That's true. That is accurate currently. But I feel like there have been stages of my life where I would go out and do things, and I enjoy having a social life. So it would be better for me to get my late swaps out of the way before I socialize.
But would you? How about Sunday morning waking up for 10 a.m. lock for NFL?
You're right. That would suck. That part I would not
Right.
enjoy.
Right.
So you might
And
be
and
right. Maybe
and
maybe I would prefer that.
soccer for me, that means it would be a 7 a.m. Premier League Saturday morning lock. Get out of here. Waking up at
Yeah.
7 in the morning on Saturday. Get out of here. Right? I
Yeah.
ain't doing
So
that.
I guess it's different for me for NFL versus NBA.
Right. Well,
NBA,
NBA
I'd
and
rather.
MLB. Okay. I could see how. Oh, 4 p.m. Right for and then you NBA. The last game locks at like 7:30 p.m. and
Yep.
then you're good. And what? Okay, I get it. Right? I could understand.
That
I could
see
understand
that
that
that's what
part.
I'm thinking when I say I prefer West Coast. Is I'm
Right.
thinking of
But how
NBA
about
right now.
everything else? There's other sports.
Yeah. Yeah. It would change.
Right. USFL, if those games start at like noon Eastern, right? That's 9 a.m.
Yeah. For that, I would prefer to be East Coast.
Right. And it's not just not like a 9 a.m. lock. I mean, you're probably going to be up an hour and a half, 2 hours
Right. You got to
before that.
prepare.
To build
Yeah.
the lineups and everything. So
Although USFL is just one game, so you really don't need as much
true. But
time.
how about NFL? Oh, 10 in the morning, and now you're
Yeah.
waking up. You gotta be
NFL
out
would
of
be an
bed at
issue
8
for
in
me.
the morning on Sunday mornings.
Yeah. That would definitely be an issue for me.
Right. Right. I'd rather just be up late. I'd rather be on the East Coast and just be up late. I don't
Yeah.
mind. I don't mind baseball. We have sometimes baseball games that are still, it's the 14th inning and it's 1:45 in the morning on the East Coast. But
Yep.
I mean, I could go to sleep and wake up and see if I won the next day. Who cares? I mean, whatever.
Right.
Right? It's not that big of a deal. So to me, the East Coast of Canada, so Nova Scotia would be, yeah, but the weather would still be cold. I kind of don't like the cold anyway. Is DFS league? Can you play in DraftKings in the Caribbean? Is Puerto Rico?
No
Can
idea.
can we can we do it in Puerto Rico?
Don't know. Never been.
Okay, because that would be ideal.
Oh yeah, for sure.
'Cause now we're on the East Coast and now it's warmer.
Yeah. I'd say these are things you need to look into before you move. Is it legal to play where I want to move to?
Right. So I guess the worst place to play then would be Alaska.
I would not enjoy that. Yeah.
Right.
But that's
Or
just
I
in
guess
general the
Hawaii.
worst
I
place
mean,
to live.
the weather and the place would be great. Hawaii is expensive to live, right? And you'd be waking up at 5 in the morning for NFL luck.
Yeah. Yeah, not interested in that lifestyle. So I guess there's no right answer to this question of which
No,
is the
there is a
best
right answer.
time zone. Okay,
Right.
what's your right answer?
I don't know, but it's. But it seems like the time zone debate, it always comes down to whatever you're used to. There's people that
Sure.
grew up on the West Coast that go, I can't see possibly doing anything else than that time. And if you grew up on the East Coast, when I would go to Las Vegas when I was playing poker. Uh, I went to Las Vegas like 3 or 4 times a year, and it was just like I'd be up. I'd wake up at 11:30 or something, right? Because I mean, you'd play till like 3 in the morning or something. Then you wake up at 11:30 noon, and you're like, why the hell is the football? Why the football games on? Like it's already
Yeah.
halftime of like Sunday football games, and I'm like, and then what ends up happening is if you're a night person, it's 10 o'clock at night, right? And you're like, why are sports over?
Right.
Right?
I want to
Like
watch
why
some
is
baseball
there
or
nothing on? Why literally is why is nothing on anymore?
yeah.
Why does nothing exists? Right? So
Yeah.
yeah, to me that's my correct answer. It's like I'm a night person. I typically don't go to sleep till 1 in the morning as it is.
Yep. Me too.
So why do I care about getting all my late swaps in by 7:30 at night? just so I could just twiddle my thumbs for the rest of the day.
Yeah,
But I'm
I
also
guess.
talking to someone that has no life outside of this.
Yeah, I'm a pretty social person in general, so I would like to get stuff done and then be able to go out and go to play softball or play trivia, whatever I have
You
going
can't do
on a
that in
given
the
night.
afternoon. It's more.
I
I think
could,
it's
I
more
guess.
about other people, right? Because like you are friends with normal people.
Yeah, I'm friends with normal
So
people.
they're working at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So you can't just
Yeah,
like go
exactly.
out and do
Yes.
right.
Yes, my schedule needs to line up with my wife and my friends and other people as well. I can't go do trivia by myself
Well, what do
in
you
the
what do
afternoon.
what do your friends think now that you do this full time? Like, do they
I think,
understand anything about any? I mean, I know your wife obviously does.
yeah.
But
So
what
I
does
would
your
say,
wife say to her friends? Where it's like, oh yeah, Neil quit his very well paying job to uh, to sit at home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and talk to someone across that he doesn't know from in Kentucky, and then
yeah.
do some spreadsheet stuff, and then yell at a sports screen.
Yeah. Well, she's the one that I overheard her saying on a work call. It's not gambling; it's skills-based daily fantasy sports that I play, which I loved hearing that. I was like, yes, I've made it. If she's calling it skills-based at this point, yeah. So she's bought in
Well, obviously
at this
she did.
point.
I'm talking about like everyone else. Like, do
Yeah, yeah.
people do your friends and people like that, her friends and relatives or whatever, think that like that you're
It's a scale.
nuts, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a scale. So yeah, like I remember so last year at the when I was at the Tournament of Champions, we sent like a screenshot of my lineup to her family saying, "Okay, this is the lineup that we're cheering for now." And her sister responded right away, "Don't try to catch lightning in a bottle twice," or something like that. And a lot of people, I think, just have that mentality of, "Oh, you're a gambler." Like that's so
Right, that it's a
people there are
lottery. That it's just
there's always, yeah, going to be those people that, oh, you play the lottery essentially every day, and this isn't long term. It can't be profitable long term. So I think that there's always going to be some people that don't understand what it is, or just think that it is, a casino game that long term you're going to lose. And then I think I have friends who I are willing to get into it more deeply, and I can actually like explain how it works and explain how there is edge. And yeah, I definitely have a lot of friends who understand what I'm doing, and a lot of friends who I think would say it's a perfect job for me, because I've always been super into daily fantasy sports and analytics, and it just kind of it makes sense for me more than being a lawyer, which I think anybody who knows me probably knows that it's not right for my personality, the job that I had been doing. So for the most part, I think my friends kind of understand what's going on. But it's definitely a scale. I have friends who, we told one of my friends I do a monthly Zoom call with my college friends, and explained that I had quit my job to do daily fantasy sports. And she said, "Oh, well, I guess Elisa, you just have to accept that you're bringing in all the money now," or something like that. I was like, we didn't go into it, and we didn't tell her like, no, that's not the case. It pays pretty well. But yeah, it's a scale for sure.
but I would think that the the content stuff that you do like looks a little bit more
Yeah,
normal.
well, that's one of the benefits of doing the content. Like, I don't get paid much at all for the content I do, and I don't do that much. But to be able to just tell people, yeah, and I do content related to daily fantasy sports, then people are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like that's a respectable job to do content related to something, or maybe to some extent more respectable, at least in people's minds, than gambling.
Right, because a lot of times, like if I'm out and about or something like going to the dentist, or the doctor, or whatever, they always ask you about your occupation, or whatever. If I feel like not explaining anything, I just say that I'm a web developer, because that's
Nice.
what I mean. I've been doing that for 20 plus years, so that's I just computer programming. It's something. It's even though it's technically not computer programming, but whatever, just whatever. But then sometimes like it's well I do do you know fantasy football? Oh yeah, I know fantasy football. It's like I do I do shows. Like I
Yeah.
do that right. Like I make it like I do like a like a web radio show. Like you make it out like that. Especially
Yep.
when I can't take, like appointments like at 11 o'clock in the morning. Like, oh, can you come in at 10 o'clock? It's like, nah, I got my show. My that's my job to do my show 11 o'clock in the
Right.
morning, right? Not everything else. Like, But from the most of the people that know me for a long time know that whatever I'm doing is going to be something that is not commonly acceptable, and people don't think that you could possibly make money doing it.
Right.
Like that's
Yep.
pretty much my entire life is, oh, like my relatives. I most of my relatives, I come from a Jewish family, so it's pretty much lawyers, accountants, doctors, biochemists and computer people. I mean, it's all
I mean, there are a
boring
lot of
shit.
Jewish comedians
Right. Yeah, well, true.
also.
But I'm saying, but my entire family just do those types of things. So it's like,
Yeah, yeah.
oh, Jordan. Oh, stand up comic and plays poker, and then it does like it's always going to be something where it's like I hope he's able to pay his bills, and
Yep.
it's like no, I make more money than most of you people, and sit and do this shit for
Right.
20 plus years, just not having a real job. Uh,
Yep.
so explaining it to my relatives, it's I'm the misfit person. I'm
Are there
I'm
do
the I'm
you
the
have some
interesting one.
relatives who get it, or are they all
No,
kind of
no, that I mean, it's not like I talk to these people that often at all.
okay?
Right,
All right.
right. But most of the time, if you relate it more to like poker, like people, it's past the point. Like maybe in 2002, 2003, 2004, even though poker was booming then, it still was viewed down as, oh, you play that as a live. That's not a real thing. But now people
Yeah.
respect. They know that there are professional poker players, so you could say that
Right. Right.
you're a professional poker player, and it's not like you're a degenerate or anything. Uh,
Yeah.
but with fantasy stuff, I typically relate it to fantasy football. And I go,
Yep.
fantasy football, and it's like, well, I'm really good at it, and I play in high state. Like I relate it more to season long stuff because they at least
Yep.
know. It's like, oh yeah, I play in a $10 fantasy football league in my office type of thing. It's like,
Yep.
well, there's this whole industry of people that play for a lot of money, and I'm
Well, and
really good
DraftKings
at
is
it.
advertising. A lot of people have seen DraftKings advertisements, so
Right.
theoretically, you can say, "Have you heard of DraftKings?" That's
Right,
what
but
I
sometimes that's a
try to be
bad
like.
thing. Sometimes that's a bad. The
True.
2015, 2016, when it was all over the place,
Yeah.
especially with in the news, and then they banned it here, and it's like, oh, John Oliver had a segment about it, or it's like,
Did
oh,
he?
you play you
Missed
think you
that.
could win at the thing that no one could win at. But of course, they don't go by the like, oh, well, 2% of all the players win all the money. It's like, yeah, I'm part of that 2%. Like,
Right.
you're part of the 98% that
Yeah.
doesn't win at this shit, right? So that's, but typically it either leads to no questions or it leads to too many questions. There's never a sweet spot.
Yeah.
I don't mind the sweet spot of someone that's interested
Yeah.
and to the point where it's not like you have to essentially explain every aspect of the entire game, or you get the people that view it as like a complete throwaway of like you said, it's like it
Yeah.
sounds like you're just going and playing scratch off lottery tickets at the bodega,
Exactly. I think
and
a lot of
that's your
people make that
living.
assumption.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. I think you. It's good to associate it with poker, just because it's like, yes, there is a lot of luck involved in this, but long term, there are people who can do it professionally. It is a game where you can win long term. It's not like, you're playing against the house and the house is going to win long term. It's not like blackjack where like you're guaranteed to lose if you keep playing. It's like poker where you're playing against other people, and if you're good enough, you can consistently win long
Right, and
term.
they've
I think
heard of
that's
professional poker players. I mean,
yeah,
even if they may
exactly.
not know people's names, they know that there are people like that. Oh, the people I've seen on TV, and maybe they've been on the Tonight Show, or like they're okay.
Yep.
It's a thing. You don't like,
Yep.
we don't get Alex isn't appearing on the Colbert Show on CBS,
Right.
or like that. There's no like professional DFS players that the mainstream public, like, no matter how many goat videos that DK puts out on his YouTube channel for 89 viewers, people don't know who Big
Right.
T is and
Yeah.
Whistles and Awesome are.
Yeah. Yeah. People outside the industry. I think the gateway there is more season long people doing daily fantasy sports content is probably the gateway to
Right.
bringing in more of an audience, because there is a pretty big audience for season long content. I think.
And people play that.
Yeah, tons of people play season
Right.
long.
Right. And I
Yeah,
mean, people still would play on like DraftKings or FanDuel and do the daily stuff, but to them that's the lotto ticket.
exactly.
But they
Yeah,
can understand if they've played in an office or a friendly fantasy football league, they understand that there is some skill to it.
right.
Right. There's some.
But a lot of those people who played the season long, in my experience, are the people who are more like, well, daily fantasy sports is just a lottery. Like, there's
Right.
no skill involved there because it's so different that they don't understand the different type of skill involved in DFS versus season long.
The skill gap in daily fantasy is bigger than in season long. You could get luckier in season long than you get in
Oh, for
daily.
sure. Yeah,
I mean,
I
I mean,
agree.
ta- I mean, take a look at especially if in a league that is draft. I mean,
Yeah,
like it's like, oh, Christian McCaffrey, oh, out for the season. Oh, you're
right.
done. I mean, like
Yeah,
how do you get around that, right? Like the injuries are just you're done, right? All of a sudden you don't have a quarterback for week 6, and you have to pick up Blake Bortles or some bullshit, right? Like
I mean, I think it depends on how into it you are. Like, I think if you're a really serious season long player, you can always week to week take advantage of players being dropped, or you see a guy getting hurt, picking up their backup. At least in my experience, it was always back when I was super into it. There was always an edge just to being super into it. Whereas I think most people just don't care enough to
right.
find
No, I'm
that
not
edge
saying that
in
there
season
isn't an
long.
edge. I'm just saying that the edge in daily is much bigger than in
Oh, I
season.
agree. Yeah,
Like it's much
100%.
easier to get unlucky playing season. Like it, even if you're just not in one league. If you're in 10 leagues, you could be the best season long fantasy football player and come in seventh or worst place in all of them, right?
Sure.
Even
Yeah.
if you diversify in like some leagues you had this spot and some leagues you had that spot, just with the just how the nature of NFL is, where you can't draft every week. Now, if you were in a league where you redrafted every week, so sort of like a daily seasonal type of thing, then to me that's bigger edge.
Oh, yeah. That'd be a huge edge. Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, I'm
More edge in
preaching the I'm
DFS for
preaching to the
sure.
choir. We both know this
Yeah,
already. Right,
right. Yeah, I'm on your side here. I
right.
prefer DFS. I think there's more of an edge. I think there's a reason that good players stay good for longer. Yeah, I'm with you.
And then there's the middle ground, which is best ball.
Yep. Yeah, I have not had. It's funny because I put so much effort into best ball, and I'm like, man, I can't believe that I haven't had a really good year yet. Like, I haven't made the finals in a best ball contest yet. And then I think about it more, and I'm like, yeah, it's extremely small sample size. Like,
Right.
I've played 2 seasons. That's basically 2 slates. Like, it's 150 lineups per season, but that's like extremely small sample
Right.
size. There's no.
Imagine playing tonight, Monday NBA, and Tuesday NBA, and then going, I don't know why I haven't won yet.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Right. That's essentially what you're
But it
saying.
feels like because you put so much effort into it, and like each draft is like, can be anywhere from like half an hour to, if you do a slow draft, it'll take weeks potentially, or
Then why
maybe a
do
week.
it?
But
To me, that's my case to be made for not investing money into it. I think
yeah,
I think
and
I
that,
think the first off, yeah, you have to hold your money for that long, right?
yeah,
you don't have it's not available to invest elsewhere. And number
yep,
two, just the time basis of, like you said, a half an hour draft times 150 for one
yep,
slate, for it's what essentially is one slate,
yep,
and you have to put all that at, like, why is the return that good? Now I can understand if it's part of your normal portfolio and investment and all. I mean, I'm not saying that you can't do it, but given the choice, I'd rather spend the money and the time elsewhere.
yeah. I would rather spend it on DFS in general, but yeah, I think, I mean, part of it's just a fun and entertainment aspect of it. You put in this effort, and then you have that team for the entire year. So there is, they're holding your money, but you're also theoretically and being entertained by it all year. Of
Well,
course, I don't
that's
look at
the
my best ball
to the
teams.
recreational person. To us,
Yeah,
we
for
don't
a
give a fuck.
recreational person.
Right? We
Yeah,
don't give a
for a
fuck.
pro, um, a lot of times there's major overlay. So I'd say that's one reason to chase it in best ball. I have not had success with that because usually when I am chasing the overlay, and it's usually it can be like 50%. Like some of them only fill up 50%. Then I will on the last day start majorly chasing that overlay, but then I have it set to auto draft, and so far I have not found that to be a successful venture. Even with the overlay, it's like okay, but if it's set to auto draft, the teams that I make are so bad that they're not good enough to compete. Especially because on DraftKings in particular, you can't set any kind of positional limits or anything like that. So like on Underdog, you can sort of craft how you want your team to look. I want to have two quarterbacks, 10 wide receivers, whatever. On DraftKings, you can't do any of that, and my teams end up being so shitty when I have it auto drafted that even if it is 50% overlay, I end up losing money. So, but theoretically, if you actually put in the time and chase that overlay is one big reason to invest in best ball. Um,
Yeah, because like Justin Herzig, I know like last season for Underdog, like set up an entire like auto draft script thing for his
really,
strategies or whatever. Like if you could scale it like that, then I'd be much more open
yeah,
to doing so. I mean, of course, but then you have to put in all the time in order to get that. Like it's just like any other system or any other process for DFS is that the more and we see this. I mean, in DFS especially, that the better you get at DFS, the more that basically you're taking a more complex process and simplifying it and speeding it up so you
yeah,
could scale it better. And it's not a matter of making your process more advanced. It's actually making it more basic. Where
right,
because when you first start playing DFS and like before projections, before anything, you could spend 6 hours figuring out what who to play and how to put lineups together, whatever. And then once you get good at that, then you start cutting out and going, how can I speed this up? What stuff
right,
matters? What stuff doesn't matter? How now I'm only building 5 lineups. What happens if I wanted to build 20? How do I make it easier to do that? And then, but you know, 3 4 years down the road, next thing you know, it's you're just showing up for a slate like 15 minutes before lock and blasting out 150 lineups and then closing your laptop. And it's like
right.
people look at that and then, but the reason why that there's still an edge is because there's still the majority of people playing are people that look at that process as, oh, that's lotto luck type of,
Right.
oh, all you're doing is punching in numbers and letting a computer choose your
You press a
teams,
button and yeah, exactly.
right? Type of
There's a
thing,
lot of that.
and how show me, and then they want to know what the button is, right?
Right.
And not it's like
Yeah.
no. Everything that I've ever learned about DFS and everything that all the strategies and everything where I could look at a slate and know this move that there, this guy's going to be more on like you have to do that first and then translate that
Yeah.
into some type of automated or streamlined process so you can then press the button.
Yeah.
Like your button is going to be different from my button, right?
Yeah. I will say I think that what you're talking about right now sounds like MLB to me more than anything. Whereas like I do think with NBA, you can't show it 15 minutes before and have an optimal strategy. Because for NBA, you need to be planning for late swap. Like you need to understand
Yeah, but you could do
where
that.
there
You could
are
do that in
potential.
15 minutes.
Yeah, I suppose if you look at the right resource, you can figure out, how questionable a guy really is, how likely a guy is to play, that kind of thing. So maybe to some extent. I think so. I just did an interview with a hubro on high stakes,
Right. I
not
listen
this
to
past
that.
Friday, the
Yes.
Friday before. If you listen to him, he's doing much more with his process than I do with mine. And I do think that he gains some EV he puts in a lot more work into his groups and
Yeah,
his
that no
setting in
his
fantasy furniture.
Peter and I are very similar to what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you both put in you're focused on the lineups and you make sure that you have settings set up so that you have, you know, no negative correlation or you limit your negative
Limited
correlation
amount,
and
right.
you're ultimately letting the optimizer choose your lineups for you, but it's based on tons of different settings. Whereas I'm like, I have a few settings that I put in there and then I mess with exposures and I end up with some definite negative EV lineups. So yeah, there's definitely you can improve by putting more time in, I would say.
Right.
But yeah,
But the more
I
that
think
you
that
do, the quicker it gets. Like Peter
yeah,
on the show talked about because you asked him about like saved groups or whatever, And I'm very
Yep.
similar to him, where I don't save anything and I just do it slate by slate. But like he explained, it's once you're used to it, you just all I go is like I could show up, you know what, half an hour before NBA lock. That'd be I could probably do it in 15 minutes, but half an hour would be easy. And then just load up projections, and I'd load up projections from multiple sources, right?
Yep.
Across. I could drag those into Excel if I want, but a lot of times I'm using one set base projections, which is typically the RG projections, and I'm adjusting those. So I'll go to
Yep.
it site. This site has this guy for 4 more minutes. This one has for 3 more minutes. I may bump up his projection by 2 points. I may bump up the ownership and change all that type of stuff. But the first thing I do is I exclude all the people that I know I'm never going to get in the lineups anyway. So I don't even have to worry about looking at them. Right. And I'm
Okay.
not building 150 lineups. I'm probably building 60 lineups. So now I can start getting rid of even some of the fringe guys that I just don't even want to bother with also. So then I have like a player pool of like maybe 45 players on a 10 game slate. And then from
Okay.
there, I just go team by team. I go, oh, this team, I only have one guy in the pool from. So obviously I don't need a group for this shit. So like, and I go and then I see, oh, it's the Raptors and it's Van Vliet, Siakam, and Barnes. Like I don't want to play Van Vliet, Siakam. I don't want to play no more than one Van Vliet or Siakam. Done. Group done. No, and then
Okay.
it's like Giannis, and it's like Giannis, Middleton, Holiday. Like okay, no more than one of those guys. Okay, let's go to the next. Depending on the price, obviously, and then you get to the Warriors. Everyone's out for the Warriors, so it's like okay, give me whatever you want from the Warriors, and then I
Right.
look to see. Okay, well, the two centers, I look at court IQ or something. It's like Kaminga comes in for this guy. So it's like either one of the two are going to say, okay, just group them out, even though they're both priced that I could technically still play them together, right?
Yeah.
Like I could do all of that for 10 games in maybe 5 minutes,
Okay.
right? Because I'm doing it so I do it every day. So like
Yeah.
it's very easy to just go through and go, are these two guys cheap enough that I can play them together? Are they not? No. Can I play Vucevic and DeRozan together? No, I don't want to do that. Like you could, but since I'm only making 60 lineups and I already have a player pool, I'm just going to exclude those types of lineups anyway. And then you do all of
Yep.
that, and then you run an initial run with nothing else, just to get a sense of what the ownership numbers are. And then
Yep.
then I just scroll down. I make 300. I scroll all the way down, and I see where there's like a cut, like where it drops heavy enough, and it's like, oh, it's 7 points off of this much ownership, and then I cap it there, and I go, okay, that's the highest lineup that I want, and then from there it's diversification. Then say, okay, I want at least three guys different, or maybe two guys different, depending on how much chalk is available. If they got guys that are like going to be 90% owned because they should be, like my unique players may only be like one or two, but in a
Right.
slate where it's very efficient everywhere, I may have a lot more diversified lineup. So that's how I choose that, and then it comes
Yep.
down to, do I want to play Dorian Finney-Smith in 42% of my lineups? No, I want him in 10% of my lineups. Run it again, and then after a couple of runs, there's my lineups and upload. I mean,
Yeah. I mean,
I just explained my like, and that's but this is
yeah.
after adjusting. Like once I get it down to like 40, 45 players, now I could go and adjust the ownership and go, well, since their ETR has them way higher than RG has them, it's like I'm gonna bump up the RG projection by 1.5, but I'm gonna bump up the ownership from 12% to 22%. And then
Yep.
because of that, I gotta lower. So that takes me about 5 minutes to do, right? So the ownership changes and everything is so like that's why I said I could do it in 15 minutes. It would be a rush. I wouldn't be
Oh yeah.
I wouldn't be comfortable. Like it would be one of those things where I've rebuilt 5 or 6 times and it's 6:59 and it's like the last run is running and it's like whatever this is, that's what I'm uploading, even though I may not be comfortable with it. If I have a
Yeah.
half an hour lead time, I typically don't get to that. But typically I'm
Right.
good 5 minutes to go, and outside of some really late scratch news or something like that, like I'm not sweating that FanDuel updater, like it goes updating your
Yeah.
lineup 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever type of thing, or a DraftKings. Like I'm
So
rarely there,
if
but
you are limiting your player pool that much, so I rarely take out players from my player pool
mm,
unless I'm doing it very intentionally because I'm like, this guy's way too high owned and doesn't really have a ceiling, so I'm going to take him out of my player pool. But I rarely take players out, and I think I would be concerned about late swap doing that. Is that do you not even worry about like, okay, I'm going to limit my player pool this much, and then news comes out after lock that this player was unexpectedly out, and now one of those players you've removed
I just
jumps
add
up.
them back
I
in
would
when I
be,
do my late swap stuff.
yeah, I guess you're more confident that you'll remember than I, and maybe
Oh,
maybe I
I
would
do
be,
remember.
yeah,
I'll reload the projections, and then I'll go to the excluded tab and see if any of them pop up because of some lineup change or anything that. So typically
okay,
I will refresh projections 5 minutes before. I mean if there's news, I mean I'll know when to do it, but 5 minutes before every game lock. So if there's a 7 o'clock game, 7:30 game, 8 o'clock game, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, like 5 minutes before those times is when I typically come back into my office,
yeah,
unless I'm
I do the
already
same
sitting
thing.
there, and
Yeah,
refresh, and then I go to I go and I see did anything change, and
I
also
suppose you can sort by fantasy points per dollar or
right,
something
right,
and
exactly.
figure out pretty quickly.
So
Yeah,
I'll go to the excluded tab and like, did any player just show up that I excluded because they would never make any lineups of mine?
yeah,
That now they're in a better position, and then I just add them back into the pool, right? Assign them some ownership number, maybe change a couple others depending on that, and then I run the late swap stuff, and then that maybe I have to end up with 20% of that guy. Who knows? I mean, whatever it is. So but I'm saying, but that whole process of what I do 15, 30 minutes before lock, like it's all on the basis of like that's what I did when I was making hand building lineups. I mean,
yeah,
it's the same exact type of thing. It's just that I'm programming a tool to all the strategic considerations.
yeah,
Like the less that I'm playing kind of chalky players, obviously the lower ownership some of my lineups are going to be. So like the more that I'm playing the chalky players, the higher that number is going to be. There are going to be some slates where there are guys that are projected for so high point per dollar or salary adjusted value that yeah, my lineup's gonna I'm gonna it's gonna I think tonight's slate is a good example if you're playing on Monday with all the Warriors being out, where essentially I think most lineups are gonna be 4v4s. Like you're gonna
yeah,
jam in the same kind of four guys and then into nearly all of your lineups. And if you're going to be jamming guys into all of your lineups and they're all going to be 50+% owned, like that ownership, some number is going to be very high, right?
yeah,
Right. But on a slate where like some guys are going to be 38% owned only because they're 1 point higher than someone else, like
right,
those are the slates where my ownership, some number is going to be very low, much
yeah,
lower than it is before. But that's all on the basis of like, well, that's the game theory wise, that's what you should be doing. What
yeah,
the exact number is, do I have an exact way of no? I scroll through the top 300 lineups and I go, let me get to one that if I hand built for this contest would make sense. And once I get to that, and then I see what the number is, I go, okay, that's where I'm capping it. Like it's a
yeah,
very blunt process, but it's a very I mean like what Peter described on your show, like I don't think would dramatically different. I don't think
yeah.
me and you do anything that dramatically different either. I just
No,
think I'm a little bit more precise about what I want, and
yep. I think that's
you have a little bit more serendipity into your lineups.
yeah. I think that's accurate. Yeah, you're definitely putting in. I mean, you've said it before. I don't remember which show it was on, but you said on a show before that your goal in using an optimizer is to create X number of lineups that look like lineups you would hand build. Like you just want the optimizer to create lineups that you would hand build, but you want it to make a lot of those. And I try to do the same thing, but I, don't put as much into it as you do. And I actually, the last day I played DFS was 5 or 6 days ago, and I ended up getting third on FanDuel, which was the best I've done in a while for a great $10,000. So not some steak knives, but I my lineup is one that I would not have hand built. It had both Trenton Watford, is that his name,
Yeah,
and Drew Eubank. So two guys who like substitute in and out for each other directly. It was clearly negative correlation, and I spent a lot of time that night thinking about it. So if I had created a group to exclude these guys so I could use max one of these two, which I probably should have done, would I have, won more money? Would I have come up with a different player in one of these spots? It would have needed to have been Drew Eubanks. Somebody replacing Drew Eubanks because Watford did really well. But I spent a lot of time thinking about. I wonder what would have happened if I'd done. Probably I wouldn't have actually had a lineup that looked like that because I don't think there was anybody who had the same price as Drew Eubanks who projected nearly as well. So it probably would have ended up being a 2v2 difference or something. But yeah, I definitely my process allows for some lineups that don't look like lineups I would have hand built, which I think is a leak in my process. Like, even though I would not have come up with this lineup that ended up getting third, and I don't think it would have been better, with that rule in this case. I think long term it would be obviously plus EV for me to do a little bit more of what you and Aha Bro do.
Yeah, but I think there is a value to serendipity.
Yeah,
Because I see lineups that other sharp 150 maxers make that I wouldn't hand. I mean that I see people in there. I see combinations of players and go, no, there. I mean there's so many slates where the winning lineup, the winning large field GPP lineup, is a lineup that consists of 8 players that were all in my player pool that based on my groups and exposures, I couldn't. There was no way for me to actually have that lineup. There's no way. It's like I would have never played those 3 players together, and I would have if I would have played those 3 players together, I would have had one player from the other side of the game, and that player
yep,
wouldn't have done well, right. Like it's one of those things where I look at the lineup and I go, no, I pretty much locked myself out of the winning lineup, and that's not to me. I don't consider that a leak either in either direction. It's
okay,
it's a matter of when we say like that instance with Eubanks and Watford. Now those 2 guys for that slate were probably cheap enough that
yeah,
they were cheap. They were cheap enough that there was enough of a chance that they would both hit a 90th percentile outcome in the same game, right?
yeah,
Even though they come in and out for each other, right? Where they're just 2 very efficient 24 minutes each type of
right,
thing, right? Or, 28-20, and the 20 minutes, some guy puts up 28 fantasy points also.
right,
So having them both in ends up being there's a probability of that. It's just that it's lower because you'd rather have one of them get into foul trouble or whatever and one guy to play 36 minutes and the other guy
right,
to barely play and just have the right one in there. That's more probable than them both hitting a GPP winning ceiling score in the same game together when they don't even share the court together. Like there is a percentage of the time that happens. Now, if that percentage of time that happens is worth rostering them because so many people won't do that, because we see that in
right.
Showdown, especially just to get
Well, that's
unique.
I think it makes a lot of sense on a smaller slate to allow
Mm,
that a lot more to set less restrictive groups. I allow for some really weird lineups on smaller slates because I'm trying to get more unique and get combos that nobody else has. But I think on a larger slate, it's more of an edge to eliminate those or to limit the
right.
number of negative
Because the
correlation in
opportunity
larger
it's more
slates.
it's not the negative correlation, it's the opportunity cost.
Right.
Like, what's the point?
Yes.
Like,
On a large slate.
right on a large slate, you have so many other options to play. Why would you play 2 centers from the same team together? On a
Yeah.
2 game slate, you just don't have that many options. So if you
Yeah.
have a lot of your competition that are purposely not playing 2 centers from the same team together, why not do it? We see it in NFL Showdown, where you know, uh, depending on the prices of the players, I've said on RG shows that I think playing both running backs from the same team is they're negatively correlated, but you're gaining more uniqueness by doing that than the negative correlation in them both together. Especially when one of them is cheat. Like I'm not talking about 2 running backs that are both 9,600 in Showdown. I'm talking about where
Right.
where one guy's 6,800 and the other guy's 3,200, and
Yeah.
they're obviously not going to be on the field at the same time. But it's like, well, one guy could rush for 100 yards and a touchdown and make it, and the other guy could just get a touchdown and 50 yards and make it, and that's reasonable
Yeah.
enough that people are avoiding it more often than they should when it
Right.
comes down to it.
Exactly. I mean, that's my general approach to showdown and small slates. And you don't need the big ceiling games from two centers who are they're not going to both put up 30 fantasy points, but on a 2-game slate, one center at min price putting up 17 fantasy points, TK points might be enough. So it can happen where this player is optimal. This combo is optimal, even though they don't put up a ton of points, because you don't really need a ton of points from every spot on a 2 or showdown slate.
Right, on a 10-game NBA slate,
Yeah,
like
where there is more
that's
opportunity cost.
less
There's
likely
somebody
to.
else who you could, yeah,
Right,
you could find a different player at min cost who's going to put up more than 17
right.
DK points. So yeah, totally comes down to opportunity cost, and there's just not that much on a really small slate.
Right, and then you judge that, and you base your groups or lack of groups based on that. There is value in serendipity, so I
Sure.
understand. Like you leave your entire pool open, and you may get 2 out of 150 lineups with just whatever guy fits in that whatever spot type of
Yep.
thing, and sometimes I just don't have those guys in my pool at all. Like if I'm
Yeah.
gonna have a guy like that in that spot, it's gonna be the $4,200 guy that I already have in my pool, and it's not gonna be the
Right.
guy that projects for 5 points lower just for the sake of because he's there. Like
Right.
to me, there's not that's not an incorrect or correct like that's perfectly fine to do. But like you said, my goal is to build lineups as if I was hand building. And if I
Yeah.
see players that, if I were to build one line, if I would just, I need to build one lineup. If there are players that, because of a projection reason or a negative correlation reason or whatever, will not make my play, will not make that lineup. I just don't even want to. I don't want to have to do the extra work of weeding out those lineups, or or having to worry about getting their ownership and their projection right. It's like, no, these are the guys that literally don't exist to me. And if they end up in the
Right.
winning lineup, then so be. What do I care? Most of the time, I would say 90% of the time in NBA, the large field GPP winning lineup is 8 players that are in my player pool.
Really. Even though, I mean, when you were describing it earlier, you were mentioning like you would have a player pool of like 45 players.
Right.
Is it usually that small? It's usually 8 players from your 45 player pool?
Yeah,
But that
something
seems
like.
really restrictive to me. Okay.
Yeah, but it depends on the size of the slate. I mean, like
Yeah.
obviously,
Okay.
like on a larger slate, it could be 60. It could be. It's going to be some. I'm only playing the top. I'm only playing the better projected players. I mean, like,
Yeah.
and typically that's what's making the winning. Uh,
Sure.
Barring some weird blowout thing where some weird guy gets in. I would say most of the time, and a lot of times the GPP winning lineup has like a guy or two in it that like they're in my player pool, but I only had them in like two out of my 60
Okay.
lineups, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not something where, oh, the winning lineup is all guys that I had at least 25% of. If that's the case, most likely I'm up somewhere in the top 10
Right.
in that scenario. But it's very rare. It's quite rare that some guy that's -8 salary adjusted value that I don't have in my pool is in the winning line. It in
Right.
NBA especially. MLB,
Yeah.
dude,
MLB.
anything can happen. Right.
Right.
But MLB, I'm not doing this. See, in MLB, since you play more team oriented, it's like either I'm Xing out the team,
Yeah.
or I'm just playing guys from the team. The only thing that I'll
Right.
do in MLB is I typically, and this burns me also, this is the lack of serendipity as well, is that uh, Lineup HQ now has an only in stacks button. I used to make groups like this, and it's a pain in the ass to make groups to do
Yeah.
this type of thing. Is that I only play home run hitters as one-offs, unless
Hmm.
unless it's a very weak catcher or middle infield position. But I will rarely ever play weak hitters in the outfield because the opportunity cost is too high. So like on a slate where like the Astros ninth hitter is like Miles Straw is batting ninth and he's outfield eligible only. Like he gets the only in stacks button. Like in an Astros stack, I don't mind him in with 4 other Astros, but I don't. If I'm playing 5-man stacks with 3 one-offs or whatever combination,
Yeah.
I don't want $2,800 Miles Straw with 3 career home runs like sitting there as a one-off because, like, yeah, sure, yes, and out of the ninth hole, he could go 4 for 5 with 2 doubles. But typically, if those types of hitters put up 20, 30 points, the team has gone off because the only way for him to
Yeah.
get there is for people to be on base and anything like that.
And
So that's
I think Peter is more similar to you in this sense too. I don't know exactly what he does, but I know we've talked about it a little bit with MLB where I don't really pay attention to who I get in one-offs, and he does something more like you do, where he sets makes settings so that his one-off is going to be have a solid projection, or is not just going to be
right,
the cheap chalk essentially.
right.
So that's interesting that you do the same thing, and obviously Peter had probably the best MLB DFS season ever last year. I mean,
We probably
excluding Millie Makers, or I
right.
mean, yeah. So it's probably a good idea. I definitely don't do that as much, where I force in certain one-offs, and it definitely makes sense. That would be a useful button to have, the include only in stacks. I'm not sure if there is a way. I think I've heard people talk about doing similar things in Fantasy Cruncher. That would be useful for me, at least, particularly in weather games, because sometimes
That's I
particularly in
mean
games where I'm concerned
that's
about the weather, that's where I'd want to use it.
right. I do that for the weather games also. Like if there's a Yankees Red Sox in Fenway, and it's possible, and it's an 8 o'clock game or something, it's gonna be after lock, and I just like if that game rains out, let it just. If I'm playing 100 MLB lineups and I'm playing 10 stacks of that game, let all 10 lineups burn. But I don't want Xander Bogarts one-offs in here and all this other stuff, and then it's like, nope, only in stacks. I just click on all the buttons, and I'm just like, yep, takes care of it. You could do it in
Yeah,
groups. It's just a pain. It's a real pain
yeah,
in the ass because you have to
yeah,
set. You essentially have to set 9 conditional groups in order to do
yeah,
that. You're,
yeah,
you're setting each player, whoever you just want in a stack. You would have to put that conditional player, and then put the other 8 or 7 or 8 players, depending on NL or NL, in the group, and then
yep.
set
I could do that.
min 4.
Yep.
Right. So if he's in, you need to have at least 4 guys from this list, which means that he can never be a one-off. But you have to do
Yep.
that for fucking everyone. And let me tell you, I used to fucking do that.
Yeah.
And it's a pain in the ass.
That would be, yeah, a lot of work. I definitely have not done that for MLB. But it would be a pain in the ass because that's a lot of players.
But you don't mind the serendipity.
I don't mind it. Yeah, that is true. I have had some lineups that have done well that I probably wouldn't have played if I put in a little bit more work into making sure there was positive correlation or getting rid of all of the negative correlation. So
Right, but that
yeah,
doesn't
I
mean
guess
that
you can
those
live
are
with it.
negative. Those are minus EV lineups. They're just
Right,
that my lineups are probably higher EV.
right.
I think
But
that's what
like
it comes down to.
that's what I'm saying is long term, you want the highest EV lineups.
Right,
Like you're going to win more getting rid of the negative correlation in large field
right.
GPPs. Obviously, there's a difference once you get into smaller field, and we've talked about that with Showdown. I like to embrace negative correlation, and there are situations where it's useful, but
But
for
there's a
large field
value in that.
GPPs,
Like we have to really the short slates and the showdowns. There's more value in being unique than in being correlative.
correlation, yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Large
But
slates there
probably
isn't, and
long
large slate.
term, long term, large field, large slates, you probably want to eliminate those. It's probably more positive EV to limit the negative correlation more than I do. So
It also depends
that's
on
all
what
I'm
you
saying.
want your attrition rate to be. Like I could understand if you're playing 150 lineups and you know that like in order to make 120 plus EV lineups, you have to burn 30 of them as minus EV. That could be worthwhile to do for process wise because it's easier than
Yeah,
someone like me that I may only play 40 to 60 lineups and it's like I'm playing 40 to 60 of the best lineups I could play.
right.
Like
That is
I,
true.
I don't want any attrition. I'm doing it. I'm purpose. Like it's almost like the less lineups that I'm making, the more work I have to put in. But when I play 100, when I play some of the slates like on FanDuel when they're doing the $4 contest or something, or sometimes in MLB like the on FanDuel because it's now only 4-man stacks. Sometimes I'm building like because I'm playing on DraftKings also, so it's like my 150 on FanDuel for baseball is just like here are the teams I want and good luck and just whatever happens happens. And on DraftKings where I may only be playing 50 lineups, I'm actually putting in like 4 times as much work just to make sure I sculpt the 50 I exactly want. And on the FanDuel lineups, I look at some of them and go, if I would have done this myself, I would have never played this line. This lineup looks completely fucked up.
That's how I am every slate essentially. Is I spend way more time on DraftKings, and then FanDuel I do in like the last 5-10 minutes. I'm making quick adjustments and trying to get a little bit weird, but I spend so much less time on FanDuel than DraftKings just because the entry fee is lower. I always have more money in play on DraftKings than I do
Right.
on FanDuel. So yeah,
I think also in NBA that you don't have to worry about as many players on FanDuel.
just because the pricing is so soft
Right.
on certain players that it's like these
Right.
players just
There are
project
certain
so much
players on
better.
FanDuel that I just I there's no point in playing. Like just why even bother? Like it seems like my player pool on FanDuel is always so much smaller because like I don't
Yeah,
need to I don't need to play $3,800 guys a lot of time unless
yeah,
it's some like he's stepping into 36 minutes or something. I like you're rarely playing pure punt plays on FanDuel. Yet on
yep,
DraftKings, you're often playing pure punt plays, and a lot of
yeah,
times on slates that have very little value, some of these punt like you could play 18 different people that are all within 2 points of each other. So
yep,
you gotta like pay attention to all of that. And on FanDuel, it's just like I don't need to play Justin Holiday. Like I don't have to worry about those types of players.
yeah.
Because I could
That's true.
jam in Luca and LeBron and Giannis and still have a lineup that has
Yeah,
actual value to it.
true. Yeah, it's a good point. It's so much softer on FanDuel, the pricing that you can generally just play a bunch of different variations of similar lineups of guys that you actually want to play.
The only
Whereas
the,
on
the, the,
DraftKings, you're
the only noticeable difference though is that the my ownership uh, projections for DraftKings are way better than FanDuel. I'm
is it
FanDuel. I'm more likely off.
okay?
Sometimes I'm way off. FanDuel is it has to be softer fields for this stuff
It is, yeah.
because on
I think that's true.
DraftKings sometimes my ownership is like almost dead on. Like I mean I could be off by 2 points here or there. Someone's 38% owned and I had him at 36. Right? Someone's 18 and I had him at 15. It's like I'm close. But on FanDuel sometimes it's like I have this guy 22% owned and he comes in at 6. And I go how did who's owned? Like I have to go scroll through and go
I know.
where'd the ownership go?
Yeah.
Because you see
A
the
friend of mine was
projections
just
and you go like, how is this guy not at least 20% owned?
yeah. I've been talking with a friend of mine, an online friend of mine who I met through the Awesemo Slack, Chris41658. If you play FanDuel, you may have seen the name because he's really, really good player. 150. I think he won a milli on FanDuel, and he's always been only a FanDuel player until a couple weeks ago. He decided to start playing on DraftKings. Just decided that the prize pools were too enticing, and after a few weeks, he was asking me about like NBA. What do you do differently on DraftKings versus FanDuel, and I actually haven't gotten back to him yet on that question. I told him I'd get back to him, but because he was like, I haven't been having success on DraftKings NBA, and I'm like, I feel like FanDuel is just so much softer. Like night to night, I'm likely to make back close to what I put in or more or profit on FanDuel, whereas on DraftKings, I'd say the nights that I actually profit are rare in large
Right.
field GPPs. You can win a lot more, but it's much softer on FanDuel. Of course, I think he got like fourth last night or a couple nights ago, so he's I think figured out DraftKings without any insight from me. But in general, I feel like DraftKings is just way softer than FanDuel NBA at least.
Well, FanDuel is softer than DraftKings.
Yeah, FanDuel is
Right.
softer than DraftKings. Yep.
Also it's the field sizes because at FanDuel with the lower price, like it's the lower entry fee, larger field, means that the percentage of 150 maxers is lower on FanDuel because it's not going to really change from site to site. If you're playing 150 lineups, like you're not a casual player. You're not like
No.
there aren't many if any bad 150 max players that exist that stay around. I'm talking yeah.
Right,
Anyone
right.
could
Long
enter
term.
150. I'm just like at this point, if you've seen someone enter 150 lineups on both sites for 2-3 years, they ain't a bad player, right?
Right.
So like there
Yeah.
aren't many in the grand scheme of things. So if we have like 80 on a given night, well, 80 in the 80, 150 maxers is, I mean, we're talking about 12,000 entries,
Yeah.
right? But I mean, FanDuel's contest may be 60,000 entries total, while DraftKings
Right.
may only be 24,000 entries total. So like half the field on DraftKings is 150 maxers, while only, 20 to 25% are on FanDuel.
That's a
So
good point.
where so a lot of single bullets and random people playing and
And even of those 150 maxes, I mean, I've just said, and you've just said that we spend a lot less time on FanDuel than we do on DraftKings.
right.
I'm sure that's true of all 150 maxers too, that we're just in general not spending as much time on our FanDuel lineup. So we're probably playing somewhat softer also just because we're not putting in as much time.
Right. But I still
But yeah,
but it still comes down to I still prefer DraftKings over FanDuel.
yeah.
It's it,
Yeah,
it it doesn't make any sense. To me, I should just be playing FanDuel all the time.
yeah. I mean, or you should really be playing Yahoo all the time. We should all
No,
be playing Yahoo all the time. It's
yeah,
the worst
yeah,
though, the
Yahoo
UI.
is that I, it depends. Like Yahoo for the large field GPP, I would agree with you. But on anything else, I disagree. I played Yahoo last season, and towards like I even this season, because I know like Chris Kirkwood plays on Yahoo. I know Brian plays on Yahoo. I mean, I know the regulars on Yahoo. Uh,
Hmm.
the contest sizes are outside of the one large field GPP. The field sizes are small enough that it's just all sharp players.
Okay.
Like, cause I would play like the 50-50s and that type of stuff, and it's basically it's train versus train.
Okay.
Like so,
Huh.
like
Yeah.
one I I don't mind being part of trains if there's 100-man contests, but not 11-man contests,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
I
I'm
like
referring when I
that's
say
really
Yahoo,
what it came
I'm
down to
referring
on
to the
Yahoo,
large field.
where like unless I'm gonna play the large field GPP, which is still smaller than DraftKings and FanDuel by 10 times.
Yeah.
What's the point of play? Like what I'm $100 worth of volume? What I'll forget about it. I'm more likely to forget I even have Yahoo lineups. That's going to eat away on the 1 or 2 days a week that I just have a dummy lineup in there and I just lose $100 or
Yeah.
$150. That is it worth even doing?
That happened to me with NFL a few times that I just forgot to set lineups and yeah, ran a bad Yahoo train. So that's true. That is a risk with Yahoo. I think early in the year, I actually had a friend who tried doing Yahoo double ups, and it was telling me that they would only fill like 50% early in the year. I assume they've adjusted and it's no longer happening, but for a little while there was major overlay in double ups head to heads on I guess not head to heads, just double ups on Yahoo.
Well, sometimes you get that on FanDuel as well towards right before lock.
Okay.
I think you're more likely you get it much more on FanDuel before lock than you do on DraftKings. DraftKings has really nailed down the contest sizing towards the
Yeah.
end. It used to be like 4 or 5 years ago that was good. That was like the 10 minutes before lock was a gold mine.
I thought it used to be they wouldn't run the contest if they didn't fill for the really small contests on both sites, I think.
No, well, FanDuel, you get it more for the GPP, the smaller GPPs and the satellites.
Oh,
We're
okay,
not talking
okay,
about we're not talking about 50-50s. Yeah, they need
okay.
100 people. Or like, those are non-guaranteed. I'm talking about
Right,
like 10 minutes before lock on FanDuel. You'll see
right,
you'll
right.
see
They run a secondary GPP,
right,
yeah, and they
right,
don't
right.
fill.
Or they're
Okay,
running like the mini ones. It's like 297 people entries, and it's a single entry, and it's like 78 of 297, and there's 2 minutes to lock, and it's like okay, there you
mm,
go. But throw that in there, right? Like
yeah,
and then you get satellites if you want to collect satellite tickets. You get tons of those, right?
mm,
DraftKings 4 years ago, like you were able to go and get like 23-man double ups, 5 out of 23 with a minute to go. Like, dude, sometimes it's 4 minutes to go before lock, and like there's no open contests. Everything is a
right,
must fill. Everything is a non guarantee. Like they just like, right.
yeah,
So if you find even a couple like that are like 18 of 23 or something, like that's a treat,
right,
right? But on FanDuel, you could just rack up. I mean, dude, satellite tickets. I mean,
yeah,
I I could probably play an entire 150 max set of a one slate simply on satellite tickets.
Currently, you're
Maybe
talking
not
about right
current
now. You
no,
could.
because I
Yeah.
haven't played NBA as much this season. But like that's
Right.
what I used to do on like last year on FanDuel. But the problem was on FanDuel last year I was just playing cash games. So I would play the satellites, and then it got to the point where I had so many satellite tickets, but I wasn't playing the large field GPP that I literally got to the point where it's like, okay, today I will play, and I 150 maxed with 150 satellite tickets, and then
Wow.
and then at the end I had like 32 tickets, and I just basically put in my cash lineup 32 times on like the last slate of the year or something like. Only because right before lock you could go down, you could find satellite, 16-man satellite, and it's 5 out of 16. And it's
Right.
like, well, why the hell not? I mean, this is, you can find it for all the sports also. I just don't play. I'm not gonna collect NHL tickets that I don't play.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
PGA stuff that I don't play. It's all like to other NBA contests, right? And then you
Yeah.
could also find the ones where it's like the monster, like if you want to try for monster satellite tickets, like you have to spend more money, but a lot of times it's like 2 out of 5 guaranteed. It's like you'll be the third person in there, and that's it. It's
Yeah.
like if you want to, but I
Chase that
mean those
overlay.
are more expensive
Yeah.
contests though. But they
Right.
don't run them as must fills.
I mean, this is Kyle Dvorak's whole thing for a while, right?
Yeah,
You talked about on a show with him that he was just chasing overlay for a while and did pretty well with it.
yeah. No, he ended up going to the NHL final,
Yeah.
all on overlay.
Yeah. Why not? Seems like a pretty sharp strategy. Just chase that overlay.
Right. Well, that's why my plan is that I'm going to start with Madden Sims.
Right. Yeah. I don't think I'm going to be following you there, but maybe people really love League of Legends. So maybe I need to be getting involved in these weird computer sim stuff and I guess League of Legends isn't sim related, but it's I don't know. Maybe I need to get into these weird online things that I don't fully understand yet.
Right. You have the time, right? You're a night person.
Yeah, and Madden, I imagine it's just you're making NFL lineups essentially, right? It's
Right. That's
it's
all
the
you're
same
doing.
as yeah.
But it's a video game
Maybe I
playing it
should.
out.
Yeah, who cares if
Right.
it's
We're
if you've
degenerates.
got
Just gamble on
projections, you've got
anything. Who
ownership
cares?
projections. Yeah,
Right.
why not?
Why not? So you have who's next on? Do you have RBX coming
I'll
up?
be interviewing RBX on Thursday. So we did an interview 2 weeks ago, and then learned this past week on Tuesday afternoon that we had lost the recording.
Oh, so you have
So
to interview him again.
I'm going to interview him again this week on Thursday, which is a bummer because we both enjoyed the last show. It was a fun time. So hopefully
Did
we
you talk
can
about sex?
a little bit. We touched on it
Did
just
you talk
briefly.
about when he missed golf
We
because of
touched on it.
okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's the
I
only thing
mean,
I want to hear about.
not explicitly. Like I didn't, I tried to be a little bit coy about it, I guess, but we touched on it a little bit.
So
So
in the replay,
hopefully we can.
now you get to interview him again. What was up with that? What was up with the golf slate where you missed luck
Yeah,
because you were having too much sex?
yeah. You think I just go for it? Just ask
Yeah,
it
why
just like
not?
that.
Be
I mean,
bold.
I looked on our podcast stream. We're listed as a clean podcast, which the producer
Having
did
lots of
tell me
sex, that isn't that
I don't have
good.
to worry about that. Yeah, yeah. It's not a major concern of mine. I'm probably not going to censor myself too much, but yeah, we'll see. We'll see what we talk about.
And that's
Maybe we'll talk about the exact same stuff.
That's high stakes, a DFS discussion show.
Correct.
And it's now on iTunes. You could find it there. You could find it on Spotify or Spreaker or wherever you get your podcasts, as well as the
Yeah.
Awesemo podcast feed. But in order to catch it on the Awesemo podcast feed, you have to sort through like 700 other shows.
There is, if you go to the playlists, there is a playlist specifically for high stakes. I think I might have to pin it on my Twitter or something, make it easier to find.
Yeah, that
I've
would
never
help.
pinned a tweet, but that would probably help.
Okay, so pin that tweet.
All right, I'll do that.
It's not
I'll
that
do that
hard. It's just a button.
with the links.
Right.
Yeah,
Just a button.
yeah,
Embrace serendipity.
that's right. Good
Player
advice.
Q DFS on Twitter. And I'm Blender HD, as always, on Twitter. And the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, which you can pick up. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com.